All right. Hello, good evening. I'm going to go ahead and get started. And to respect everyone's time, and others can join as they will. My name is Colleen McInerney. I'll introduce myself a little bit more in a second, but today we're talking about supplementing the middle school illustrative math curriculum with Tuva. So we'll look at ways that we can enhance that curriculum with some Tuva activities, and show you where all of those resources are located on our page. Before we get started, this session is recording just for your information. This will be available on our website after we finish, and so you can access it at any time. And also will be shared with those who are not able to make it with us today or join us today. If you have questions while I'm talking, please feel free to leave them in the chat. I will periodically stop and just take a look at those, make sure that I'm answering those as we go. I'll also check in at the end to see if there are any remaining questions before we wrap up. And if you have not already created an account with us, just a free account with us, I recommend that you do that now so that when we get into the demo portion and we're actually looking at the resources on our site, you're able to participate and look at some of those resources while I'm demoing them. So if you don't have an account with us, head to tuvalabs.com, sign up for free. You can log in using your email or create an account using your email. And then when we get to the demo portion, you'll be ready to follow along with me. If you do have an account, go ahead and log in, and then you can kind of keep that tab off to the side, and we will use it in a little bit. So just a little bit about me before we get started. My name's Colleen. I'm located in Denver, Colorado, so I'm on Mountain Time right now. And I joined Tuva this past summer as a math education specialist. So it's really my job to make sure that you're getting the most out of our math products. And before working at Tuva, I was a 8th grade math teacher for 7 years rather. I taught Algebra 1, geometry, and then also for 3 of those, I was concurrently teaching math and earth and space science at the same time. So I have a real love for the kind of cross-curricular nature of math and science, and also how that exists on our website or on our curriculum. Outside of my teaching experience, I also spent 3 years working in high-need schools rather, across the island of Oahu as a new teacher coach. So I got to be in a lot of different teaching contexts in that role, which was great experience for me. My email is there. I'm going to drop it in the chat before we wrap up today. But if you ever have any questions about how to get started using Tuva, and specifically how to use Tuva to enhance your math curriculum, then I would love to connect with you at a different time outside of this webinar if you have questions that come up. But again, while we're here, please feel free to just drop questions in the chat. So we at Tuva have some ideas around math education, and specifically we see some issues or problems with what exists in math instruction today, which as a newly retired, as I say, exited math teacher, I don't put that blame on teachers, but I think in the aggregate, there are things that we feel are missing from math instruction. And I felt this in my time in the classroom as well, which is that the way that we teach math now is often really steeped in procedure and repetition. And while those definitely have a place in math instruction, what we feel is missing is often that real world context that really drives home the purpose of the learning that we're doing in class. And we at Tuva have this hypothesis that we think is borne out by the research, which is that this lack of real world context in math really leads to further, has consequences for students as they further along in their math journey. They become less engaged in their math content. That engagement leads to lack of confidence, enjoyment in mathematics, and ultimately, as students aren't feeling that engagement or enjoyment piece, they tend to not persist in their math and their STEM education as it gets into higher levels. So we see this as a problem that we're trying to address. And we think one of the ways that we address this problem that, obviously is our niche, but something that we're really passionate about, is that we can bridge this gap by using real world data in the classroom, and specifically in math classrooms, in order to bring that context that students are missing. So this is our vision at Tuva. We have a vision that all students can enjoy math and science learning when it is grounded in that real world application piece, and they can see that connection between what's happening in the classroom and their daily lives. And again, kind of the means for us to get to this vision, we think, is by putting real world data in front of students and teachers, and allowing them to engage with it, and in so doing kind of build like stronger conceptual understanding of their math concepts, while at the same time gaining these really strong data literacy skills. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, how we kind of bridge this gap between a curriculum that is already really strong and great, but then provide those more like the kind of like that deeper conceptual understanding through the use of data. Also, because at Tuva, we really try to source real world data that is of interest to students, and also that is things that are happening in the real world at that time, real world phenomena that are, evolving or in the news, or things that students will kind of connect into. We think that this will help students to kind of be co-constructors of their knowledge, because they're kind of bringing in already that lived experience into their learning. And we, again, think there's a lot of research to back this up. One example of which is on my screen now, which is that these 3 research scientists have found that data sets that are on current and interesting topics can really pique students' interest, and then also drive cross-curricular understanding between, in particular, at least for us at Tuva, math and science. So that's a little bit of what we're about, but we're going to be spending the bulk of our time today talking about how Tuva fits really nicely with the illustrative math curriculum, specifically in middle school. And so if you use illustrative math, you are aware of this, but IM is a problem-based curriculum that covers pretty much the entirety of the Common Core, or I guess the entirety of the Common Core in K-12 math. So they are a core curriculum designed to meet all the standards, and do that through problem solving, through emphasizing problem solving in real world contexts. And we think that IM does a really good job of that. We know a lot of other curriculum providers do as well. But we know that a lot of our teachers use IM. So we wanted to just demonstrate some ways that we think our lessons can help to enhance this curriculum even further, and really provide more of those real world contexts that IM is kind of seeking to do. So some ways that Tuva, that leveraging Tuva can help to enhance IM is through offering technology-based experiences. Some of IM curriculum is technology-based, but most of it isn't. And so, offering those technology-based experiences, are important for students in their learning, taking that the concepts that they're learning in their core curriculum and really applying them in new contexts, specifically in the context of real world data. And then the benefit of doing that is that students are not only practicing those real world concepts that they're getting in their IM core curriculum, they're also building data skills that we know are increasingly important for students as they move through their K-12 education, but then pass their K-12 education into college and careers, and really just kind of life in global society today. In middle school, students really begin to develop their data skills. It's part of the standards, and they are now at a place in their education where they're able to grapple with data in ways that they couldn't in their elementary education. So in elementary school, students are learning to take data and categorize it, classify into just different groups to order things from least to greatest or greatest to least, and start to talk about those ordering within groups. And that's kind of the extent of what they do in elementary school. They do get exposed to some basic graph types, which are helping them to begin those, that understanding of how we visualize data and ways that we can display it. But in middle school, this is really when students start to, I think, dig deep into what is data and what are the different things that we can know and find out about data. So in grades 6 through 8, students start to use data, or start to use Tuva to explore data distributions and start to understand these really crucial aspects of a data set, like variability and central tendency. So they are exposed to mean, median. They are exposed to, standard deviation for the first time. They get to look at the spread of data, and then they get to begin to compare groups within each of those sort of aspects of the data set. And then as they continue on in their middle school career, they also start to go from, univariate data, where we're looking at just one variable at a time, to now we're going to see what is the relationship between two variables, and start to, from that sort of like bivariate relationship, be able to recognize patterns of association. Do we see a linear pattern of association? Is that increasing or decreasing? All of those kind of foundational skills that students will then take into Algebra 1 as they start to get into more in-depth linear modeling. 7th grade is also really big for inferential statistics and probability. So students are really, for the first time, kind of grappling with how we can use sample data to make predictions about a population. And that's huge because that forms the basis of statistics and AP statistics as students move on later on in their high school journey. So middle school is big for data, and it's such a prime time for teachers to be able to begin to integrate a lot of those data skills into their classroom, and also use tools like ours in order to really enhance the core concepts that get taught at that grade level. So we're going to spend the bulk of our time together looking at some collections that we've made that kind of do that alignment between illustrative math and Tuva for middle school. So I'm going to pause for just a moment and ask that you, if you haven't already, you go ahead and sign in. And then once you are signed in, from your dashboard, you are going to go into the content library, and this little drop-down menu in our content library, and we are going to be working today in our collections. So our collections are a place where we have, the name is pretty simple or pretty self-explanatory, but it's a place where we have essentially collected a bunch of lessons that are all related to each other. So you'll notice that actually our IM collections are right here at the top. We do have other collections as well for both math and science. But essentially what we've done is that we've taken all the lessons that we feel really match up really well with IM grade 6, and we've put them all into one place just to save people time when they're so they don't have to go hunting around into our content library to look for stuff. So let's go ahead and start with grade 6, and I'll talk a little bit about the structure of the collections, and then we'll look at some sample lessons that we think align really well to IM units of study. So for each of our collections, we have essentially outlined them by unit, and given a little overview of what the collection is about. And then because what we're really trying to do here is just enhance the IM curriculum, we're not going to have lessons that match up one-to-one with every single lesson of the curriculum. That's not our goal. our goal is to do the things that we do really well. And the things that we do really well are, lessons that are going to be enhanced by the use of data, which not every lesson is, especially in sixth grade math. A lot of sixth grade math is around number sense and the number system. So that isn't always best served by using data. But in particular, Unit 8 of IM grade 6, it is really well served with lessons that use data or data applications. So that's the only unit that we focus on for grade 6. And the way that we've outlined it is we've talked about what that unit is. You can get a little overview from IM. This is directly from IM about what students are going to be working on in that lesson, or that unit rather. And then for every lesson that we feel is really well served by the use of data, we've linked, first of all, the IM lesson here so teachers can go back and kind of reference what that original lesson was with IM. And then we've made some suggestions for lessons that can either be an extension of the lesson that was already covered in IM, or in some cases, teachers may decide that actually, rather than doing the practice that gets assigned in this IM lesson, we can replace that practice with some practice using Tuva. So for example, lesson 4, and I'm going to zoom in just a little bit because I know the text can get kind of small. For lesson 4 on dot plots, students can create a dot plot based on some fabricated data, or kind of like a really simple example, or they could do some practice using our dot plot lesson on different breeds of dogs, and know that this data comes from a real world source. We have all of our data is sourced within our activities, so teachers can see where they're coming from. So you can see how, like, if the lesson is kind of calls for it, it can be helpful to just replace that practice with something that we're doing on Tuva. So we have a number of lessons within this unit that we feel are really well served by a Tuva example. And I'm going to actually focus on this lesson, lesson 10, finding and interpreting the mean and as the balance point. So I'm going to take a moment to just look at the IM lesson. So in this lesson, students are looking at the balance point. They're learning how to calculate the mean and doing some practice based on some real world examples that are here, and some word problems. Okay, and they're using dot plots to kind of like visualize this mean. Okay, but what if instead of doing that, students could compare dot plots using a bunch of data on M&Ms. So in this data set that this activity is based on, we have data on 816 cases of M&Ms, 3 types of M&Ms, peanut, peanut butter, and regular. And rather than just calculating the mean based on a set, a standard kind of like algorithm based on random numbers that don't really seem to be tied to anything, students can actually calculate the mean based on these different groups of M&Ms. So we could look at the distribution of the mass by our 3 different types of M&Ms. And I'll just give the warning that when I am on Zoom and Tuva at the same time, sometimes that does slow down my screen a little bit. So please bear with me. It definitely goes slower than usual when I'm trying to do 2 things at once. Okay, so we can actually have I think, much more interesting conversation about mean and median when we are looking at data that students might actually be personally connected to and interested in. So this whole lesson, I won't go through every piece of it, but this lesson kind of has students explore, why are these different means or medians, well, initially, like, why might we have these different means? Then we kind of go through this discovery process of understanding, like, okay, we're actually looking at 3 different types of M&Ms. And so now it makes sense that the mean mass of peanut M&Ms is a good amount higher than our plain M&Ms because we know that they have something inside of them. So we can kind of like have these real world discussions around our measures of center and our mean and our median. Close the wrong tab. All right, let's return to our sixth grade collection one more time. Okay. So as you can see, we have suggested a number of multiple activities for each of these lessons that we have here in our collection. I know I'm scrolling through them really quickly because I know that you can look at them at your own pace. But I do want to point out that for each activity that we have created, or that, I'm sorry, that we have aligned here within this lesson, we've also added in the data set that is associated with that activity. So we have a lesson here on roller coaster speeds that introduces students to box plots and how we read them and what they're used for. And then we've also linked in here the roller coasters data set that activity was based on. So if for some reason you are looking at an activity that you see here that's kind of that's aligned to a lesson that you're doing using your core curriculum, and you decide, okay, I like this lesson or I like this data set, but it's not quite getting at all of the things that I want to accomplish in that lesson, then we have a new feature, which is our create activity feature, our activity builder feature. And so you can actually author your own lessons based on the data sets that we have in our data set library. So because this is already within that collection and you know that we have an activity that sort of relates to that lesson, this is it's an indication that this data set is really good for looking at things like box plots or measures of center, things like that. And arguably, there are a lot of data sets that could probably accomplish that same goal in our data set library. Point being, though, that you can then take that data set and create your own activity based on that data set. So I won't go into too much depth with this create activity feature, but I did want to point it out. And just to say that you have lots of options for then, kind of taking our curriculum as an idea and then tailoring it to meet your needs if it doesn't quite, fit everything that you were trying to accomplish in that lesson. And we have prompts along the way that help you to create an activity so that it looks similar to what you would expect to see on our site. All right. I'm going to give my computer a little second to catch up with me. And I'm going to head back to our collections. Okay, so grade 6, not as heavy on data standards as grade 7 or 8. So let's take a look at grade 7. Grade 7, as I mentioned previously, is where students really start to dive into, they further their skills, their data skills that they had in 6th grade. They start building on those concepts of measures of center. They start to then take those ideas of measures of center and begin to compare groups. And then they also are introduced to random sampling and how we can use that as kind of a predictor for a population. So again, for grade 7, we have 2 units this time that we feel are really well served with using data or enhanced by using data. And so the first unit is proportional relationships. And the second unit is unit 8, and I forget what that unit is called, probability and sampling. So for 7th grade, we have the IM lesson linked, and then we have our recommended activities that go along with that. And I wanted to look specifically at one of our probability and sampling activities. Okay, so one of as I mentioned, one of the big things that students do in 7th grade is they begin to compare groups. So we have this IM lesson in grade 7 where students are comparing groups. And in this case, they are, for example, looking at 2 dot plots where they're kind of comparing the measures of center of the distribution of the data set of women's and men's sports teams. Doing a little bit of data is like a full authentic data set, sort of like a background set, kind of build this conceptual understanding or build an understanding of the concept. And the question is, okay, take that concept and actually do the application piece. We have women. And they're going to use those to compare income ranges of men and women using the mean and quartile summary statements about things that our if Tuva, all our tools are so for students to be able to kind of up with it. If it's up, we have some we're doing before. It's easy for students to play around with the data, get comfortable using it, and get comfortable with mistakes and then correcting those. And we are, of the mind that builds in of itself because they're doing that sort of like trial and error practice. And they really only need to do it a couple of times to be tools and understand what they do. And it's a really important process. In this or because it's something that they would have learned in grade math, and getting to see plot in action rather than calculating, the first quartile, the third quartile, sort of algorithm. And we'll answer some questions and and making it less esoteric by making it visual. Visual data. Data, for example, so 2000, or the US BLS in 2010. So, real world is that. And finally, I was a teacher and there weren't any students at my school in 8th grade math. So I for some schools, 8th grade math is not. If that's the case, we do an alignment between. So you can see those examples in our curriculum as well, collection library as well. If that's your situation, you can go ahead and check those out. Units in 8th grade math are served by the use of data. Relationship. This is kind of an extension of this. And then your relationships. In unit 6, we're associations and data. So real world data. So I have to look at lesson. Look at premium tab means it's description. This lesson, students are looking at slopes. They're finding out what a negative slope means. Text of this, some real world examples. They have, they're going to subtract it from value, create a negative slope. And negative example. So we have examples, but essentially what students are doing, they're taking a world example, plotting a graph. Obviously, incredibly beneficial. And also, especially linear modeling is understanding why we have a linear equation in the first place. We don't have MXP so that we can kind of just like random plot some things on a graph. We essentially create linear equations in order to model linear data in the real world. So, linear equations are an estimation tool. Has that's like a thing that our does is clear that linear equations exist in order to make data. The variables within our linear equation have meaning. So in this case, looking at how a driver's ability to see while they're driving far distances is their age. So their age is our input, and the how far they're able to see is our output, and then our slope is how much that either increases or decreases. Spoiler, decreases with time, but how that decreases as Always for teachers trying activities, try it as is. I have kind of going for you. So I always when you're looking at one of our activities, try it out as you're being asked to kind of navigate through the school and navigate through the lesson. It's always going to start with a screen that tells you a little bit more about the lesson. That's going to prompt students to kind of learn more about these data come from transportation. And commission. The researchers determine the maximum distance at which that's kind of what they're measuring. List the ages of the drivers and then to create the relationship between liability. I'm so sort of about that. Then approximately line. So to have students begin to make that connection between like, okay, does this actually make an exact straight line? No, we can that it is approximating a straight line, and this real thing is perfect and a straight line. Our modeling tool in this lesson, and in 8th grade, tools start to come into use for our school students, and they're going to a squares line, and then so we see the equation and students to pull on their understanding here of developing a linear equation, which they were doing in that ion lesson that I showed you, and so the squares line and writing that equation. We'd say y equals negative like applying that function. That I just wanted to kind of functionality tool. You can also know the function is they can like and see if they're correct. You're having students who are equation. You can have them what I method of seeing it. I'm sure if the answer is correct, like do check. To all of our lessons. So we kind of start, like I said, with that view students usually acquainted with, and then they'll start being asked to kind of engage with our tool and then answer some questions based on what, or they'll be asked questions to like apply with about the concept. Questions. So, see, like at the beginning of this, we had those open-ended questions to about their prior knowledge, and then a lot of lessons have some pre-graded or some like automatically graded questions. Question that students any feedback. The maximum page the equation is going to just their answer, and they get feedback. That gets some feedback as well. like kind of about our. Okay. Last thing, just for any that I just want to make sure I talk about anyone who new or might be thinking, hey, this is great. I see a lesson. I want to that seems or that then I'm teaching that how to and use that with students. So all of our lessons, we'll see lesson about I told you all to try as student and then previous screen, but you'll stop to that. So the class made. Oh, okay. Let me see. So this is a class that I've made within my dashboard. So I'm going to assign this to my students. Whenever I assign something to my students, I'm able to leave some instructions. Hello. I can tell them when an assignment is due, and I can also change the number of points that an assignment is worth. Maybe I want to make this worth more points or no points at all. I can do that, and then I can assign it to my, in this case, my 7th period. Once it's assigned to my class, I'm first of all able to see if any of my students began working on it. I obviously just assigned this, so I don't have any students who are currently working on it, but that will appear here. And when a student has started to work on an assignment, they can then, or I can then, as the teacher, view their responses over here on the right. And then once some students have created some responses, yeah, let's actually look at what those look like. Just going to log into another account to see some responses because I don't have any students currently in my classroom. Oh, okay, maybe we don't have any students completing assignments in this one either. That's okay. But essentially I will be able to see, oh, that's okay because I'm a student right now, that's why. I'll be able to see in my dashboard whether students have completed it. I can look at their responses individually, and then I can grade them on the spot, give my students feedback as they go, and then again, assign them any points that I want to according to what I'm looking for with that assignment. All right. I'm going to go ahead and navigate back to my dashboard. And then I'm just going to take us to our content library. So if there's anything else that you are looking for that maybe you feel doesn't get captured in one of our collections, you can also visit our content library. All of our math lessons are available here with a bunch of filters that we hope are helpful to be able to narrow down what teachers are looking for, what you're looking for when you come to our content library. One thing I do want to mention just before I close is that each week we are putting out new data stories for math. And these data stories use several really well-researched and like high instructional value strategies that we then develop into these little short data stories. Data stories are meant to be completed in about 10 to 15 minutes. So I like to think of them as like a bell ringer or a do now. And they are on really fun and interesting topics. Let's look at just the data stories in our activities or in our content library. So you can see we are putting out all of these new, like really fun data stories that fit different grade levels.
and a number of them are in our 6 to 8 range, so perfect for middle school. And really, most of them can be used across all 3 grades. There might be occasionally be one that's labeled 6 to 8 that might be a little bit challenging for 6th graders, but in general, if it says 6 through 8, it can be used for across all 3 grade levels. All right, just want to share my email in the chat one more time. Let me go ahead and put it back on the screen as well so that you have it. If you have any questions while you're working in Tuva, or you want to find ways to integrate Tuva into your curriculum, or you want to learn how to create your own activity on Tuva that aligns to some math standards, then please feel free to reach out to me. I would love to connect with you and figure out how we can use Tuva, or how you can use Tuva to enhance your curriculum with your students.